The champagne flutes clinked beneath a chandelier dripping with diamonds. Laughter echoed across the grand ballroom at Atlanta's Riverside Club, where Georgia's elite gathered for the Whitmore Foundation's annual black tie gala. Camera flashes sparked like stardust, illuminating silk gowns and tailored tuxedos, as servers floated by with trays of truffle canapes and artisanal cocktails. At the center of it all stood Sterling Whitmore, 32, tall, crisp in a midnight blue tom, Ford suit, and CEO of Whitmore Holdings, one of the most powerful investment firms in the South. With a jawline sculpted by his father's genetics and a net worth soaring past 8 figures, Sterling looked every bit the American dream realized. But while the room hummed with energy, Sterling's mind wandered. "Sterling, come here, man," a board member called, waving him over for photos. Sterling walked over with his signature half-smile. A photographer posed them in front of a branded step and repeat, capturing the image of wealth and charm. "Congratulations again," the man said, clapping him on the back. "Biggest quarter since '08. Your parents must be proud." "They are," Sterling answered smoothly. He'd learned the art of smiling when his chest felt hollow. "Your father always said you were meant to lead," the man continued. "And your mother, well, Vivian brags about you every time she walks into the country club." Sterling nodded politely. He didn't have the energy to correct the illusion. As he turned to greet another investor, a woman nearby leaned over to show off baby photos on her phone. "Look at my grandson's smile, Sterling. Doesn't he look just like my daughter?" Sterling glanced at the screen. The boy had a wide, dimpled grin. "He's adorable," Sterling said. Something in his tone made the woman pause. Her smile softened. "You thinking about settling down yet?" He chuckled gently. "One day," but he wasn't thinking about settling down. Not tonight. He was thinking about someone else entirely. Across the room, his mother waved at him with pride, seated beside his father at the front table. The two of them, married for 35 years, were still hosting events. Together, still playing power couple to the city's upper crust. Sterling envied that stability, even if it came with expectations. He should have been happy. He'd made it, bigger than anyone predicted. Grew the company by 40% in 2 years. Made the 30 under 30 list at 28. Drove a Bentley. Owned a Buckhead mansion with a heated infinity pool and skyline views of the entire city. But no matter how much applause he earned, none of it quieted the noise in his head. A server appeared with a drink. "Old-fashioned, Mr. Whitmore?" He took it. "Thanks." He sipped the bourbon slowly, letting it burn a trail down his throat. It distracted him just long enough to ignore the gnawing ache in his chest. As the night dragged on, Sterling drifted through conversations like a ghost. Wealthy couples toasted their anniversaries. Friends joked about their children heading off to Ivy Leagues. One man bragged about his son getting into Yale on early admission. Sterling nodded at it all, outwardly composed, inwardly detached. He wasn't jealous. He was removed. He couldn't remember the last time someone called him just to talk. Couldn't remember the last time he laughed for real. Couldn't remember the last time he was loved just for being himself, and not his title. He excused himself from the table and stepped onto the rooftop patio, needing air. The Atlanta skyline glowed, stretching endlessly in every direction. From up here, he could see Mercedes-Benz Stadium lit up for the Hawks game and the golden arches of downtown peeking through fog. He leaned against the railing, loosening his tie. Her name haunted him in silence, Imani. They met in college. She was studying community health, always surrounded by friends, always quoting scripture when exams stressed her out. She had warm eyes and the kind of laugh that made you forget your problems. He hadn't seen anyone like her before. She challenged him, uplifted him, made him feel seen, not as a Whitmore, but as a man. But when his parents found out he was dating a black woman from a working-class neighborhood, they lost it. They told him it would ruin his image, his future, his legacy. He should have stood by her. Instead, he walked away. It was the only time in his life he'd ever chosen fear over love, and it was the only decision that ever haunted him. Sterling looked down at the city and let out a slow breath. Even surrounded by money and admiration, he felt like a fraud. He wasn't whole. He hadn't been for years. He didn't know where Imani was anymore. He'd searched online once or twice, but stopped himself before clicking. He didn't deserve to know, until fate made the choice for him. He let her go, and never knew she carried his child. But that revelation wouldn't come here, amid glitter and gold. It would come days later, in a place he never expected to find himself, on the south side, inside a community center, where one innocent glance would break everything he thought he knew. Will he get a second chance, or is it too late? Hey family, if this story touches you already, drop a heart in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. It really helps push this story out. Sterling stood there frozen, knees slightly bent, one hand braced on the edge of the desk as if the ground itself had shifted beneath him. The community center felt suddenly too small, too quiet, too loaded with truth. Zoe had gone back to coloring, humming softly. Every so often, she glanced up at him with those blue eyes, so innocent, so familiar, before returning to her drawing of glitter hearts. Imani clasped her hands together, steadying herself. The way she looked at him wasn't angry, but it wasn't warm either. It was the gaze of a mother who had carried weight alone for years. He finally gathered enough strength to speak. "Why didn't you tell me?" Imani inhaled slowly. "I wasn't hiding her to punish you, Sterling. When I found out I was pregnant, you were already gone. Your parents made it clear I didn't fit into your world. I figured you had chosen the life you wanted." "I chose the wrong one," he whispered. "It doesn't matter anymore," she said. "What matters is Zoe." He nodded, swallowing hard. Can I talk to her?" Imani hesitated. He saw the battle behind her eyes, fear, protectiveness, confusion. Then she nodded. "Keep it simple. She doesn't know the story." He approached the small table where Zoe sat. His heart thudded with every soft step. When he finally crouched beside her, she looked up from her drawing. "Hi," she said again, with the easy confidence of a child. He smiled softly. "Hi." Zoe held up her page. 4 glittery hearts colored in pink and purple. "This one is Mommy," she announced proudly, tapping a pink heart. "This one is Nana. This one is Pastor Rob. And this one is for, She paused and tapped her chin. "Someone special. I don't know their name yet." Sterling's breath caught. Imani turned away, blinking fast. "That's beautiful," Sterling whispered. "You're very talented." "Thank you." Zoe beamed. "I like colors. Mommy says I have big imagination." She grinned. "Do you have imagination?" He chuckled under his breath. "I hope so." She leaned closer, like she was telling him a secret. "Your eyes are like mine." She pointed at them. "Blue." He nodded quietly. "Yes, they are. Cool." She shrugged and went back to coloring like it was the simplest fact in the world. But for Sterling, it wasn't simple at all. It was life-changing. Imani approached gently. "Zoe, sweetheart, go wash your hands. We need to get you ready for Grandma's house." Zoe hopped down from the chair instantly and skipped toward the sink area. The moment she was out of earshot, Sterling exhaled shakily. "Imani, you raised her well. She's bright, confident, beautiful." Imani's eyes flicked down. "Thank you." He hesitated, then asked softly, "Does she know anything about me?" Imani folded her arms. "She knows her father exists. She knows she wasn't abandoned. I made sure of that. I told her real love doesn't always stay together, but it doesn't disappear." He closed his eyes, emotional. "Imani." His voice broke. "I want to be in her life." "I know," she said. "But you can't just walk in and flip a switch. She doesn't know you. You'll need to take your time." He nodded, accepting it fully. "Whatever you say. I'll follow your lead." Imani studied him. For the first time since he walked in, her expression softened. Barely, but it mattered. "I didn't expect you to react like this," she admitted quietly. "How else would I react?" He asked. "I missed 5 years of her life. I missed her first steps, first words. I missed everything." Imani looked away. "You'll have opportunities now." He took a careful breath. "Please don't shut me out." "I'm not," she said firmly. "But this needs to be about Zoe, not us." He nodded slowly. "I understand." Zoe ran back, waving wet hands in the air. "Mommy, I'm ready." Imani grabbed her little backpack from behind the counter. "Say goodbye." Zoe turned to Sterling, smiling sweetly. "Bye, mister, with the same eyes." Sterling laughed softly and waved. "Bye, Zoe." Imani took her hand and started toward the door. But halfway there, she stopped and looked back. "Sterling, we're going to Greater Grace this Sunday." She paused. If you want to see her again, you can meet us there. His heart lurched. I'll be there, he whispered. Thank you. She nodded once, then walked out with her daughter. The door closed. Silence returned. Sterling stood rooted in place, breathing slowly, letting the truth settle into his bones. He didn't gain a family today. He discovered one. And nothing in his life, no amount of wealth or success, came close to the feeling he had when that little girl smiled at him. Hey family, if this story touches you already, drop a heart in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. It really helps push this story out. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of early spring warmth that made Atlanta come alive. Sterling stood in front of his closet, staring blankly at a row of designer suits. His driver, Miles, waited downstairs. He could have canceled. He could have sent a check to the community center and let the whole encounter with Imani fade back into memory. But he hadn't stopped thinking about her. Or Zoe. All week, he'd carried her tiny voice in his chest. Your eyes are like mine. Now he was buttoning a navy linen shirt, rolling up the sleeves and trading his polished wingtips for clean sneakers. For once, he wanted to show up as a man, not a CEO. The drive to Greater Grace Baptist Church took him south of downtown, past the neighborhoods his parents used to scoff at. But as Sterling looked out the tinted window, he didn't see neglect, he saw life. Barbershops open early, corner stores buzzing, elders sitting on porches and folding chairs. When they pulled into the church lot, the place was already alive with music and conversation. Families gathered near long picnic tables set up beside the red brick building. Children darted between games and bounce houses. Women stirred macaroni in foil pans while the men unpacked grills. A DJ played Marvin Gaye over a loudspeaker, and the pastor was walking around hugging everybody. Sterling paused at the edge of the lot, unsure if he belonged. His father would have told him this was not his world, but it didn't feel foreign. It felt warm, rooted, like love was stitched into every handshake and how you doing. He spotted Imani standing near a table, helping lay down napkins. Her sundress was simple, her braids pulled back under a straw hat, but she glowed with that same quiet strength he remembered from college. Next to her, Zoe was dancing with two other girls, twirling in her polka dot dress and shouting, "Come on, Mommy, dance with me." Sterling's chest tightened. She looked even brighter than she did at the center. Free. He stepped out of the car and started walking across the grass. A few heads turned. He was the only white man in sight, but no one sneered. A few nodded. Some squinted curiously, trying to place him. Imani turned and froze when she saw him. Sterling raised a hand in a small wave. She offered a polite smile. "You came." "I said I would." Zoe noticed him and squealed. "Same eyes, man." Sterling grinned as she ran over and wrapped her arms around his legs. Imani blinked in surprise, but didn't stop her. Zoe looked up at him. "You came." "I wouldn't miss it," he said, crouching to her level. "I wanted to see your glitter hearts." "They're at the art table," she said, grabbing his hand. "Come see." Sterling let her pull him across the grass toward the kids' craft booth. Imani followed behind slowly, still studying him. At the table, Zoe showed off her sparkly masterpieces, proudly pointing to one with a big blue heart. "This one's for you now." He smiled and blinked back emotion. "I'll frame it." He felt Imani come up beside him. "She's been asking all morning if you'd show," she said quietly. He turned toward her. "I meant what I said. I want to be here. Even if this isn't your comfort zone?" she asked. Sterling looked around. "No. This feels real." He glanced at her. "This feels more honest than any gala I've ever attended." Imani softened a little but didn't fully let her guard down. Pastor Robinson, a man in his 60s with silver at his temples and a booming laugh, approached them. "Well now," he said warmly. "Sister Imani, you didn't tell us the Whitmore CEO himself would be joining our picnic." Imani chuckled. "Didn't know until this morning." Sterling extended his hand. "Pastor Robinson, heard a lot about you." The pastor shook it firmly. "We heard a lot about you too. But today you're just Zoe's friend, right?" Sterling smiled. "That's all I want to be." "Good answer." The pastor slapped him on the back. "Now come grab a plate before Deacon Earl eats all the ribs." Imani stifled a laugh. "He's serious." As Sterling followed them to the food line, he realized something strange. He was smiling. Not the tight business smile. Not the rehearsed public one. A real smile. and it had been so long he barely recognized how it felt on his own face. The smell of barbecue drifted through the air. Children shrieked in delight on the bounce house. Marvin Gaye gave way to Kirk Franklin on the speakers. Folding chairs circled under shade trees as elders swapped stories between bites of potato salad. Sterling sat on a bench with a paper plate balanced on one knee, watching Zoe bounce across the grass like she had wings on her feet. His ribs were getting cold. He couldn't stop smiling long enough to eat. Imani sat beside him with a lemonade in hand. She wasn't watching Zoe, she was watching him watch Zoe. "Did you even taste the food?" she teased. He glanced at his plate. "What food?" She smiled quietly, looking away before he could see it stretched too wide. But he noticed. Sterling turned to her, voice low. "This is the happiest I've been in. I don't know how long." Imani blinked. "It's just a church picnic." "No," he said firmly. "It's not. It's more than that." She looked down, her fingers tightening around her cup. "You really mean that?" "I do." Their eyes held for a long moment, so long that Imani had to break it before. She fell back into a place she wasn't sure she could survive again. A shriek of laughter made them both turn. Zoe was playing tag with a boy and another girl, weaving between adults, her curls bouncing wildly. "Be careful," Imani called. Zoe waved without looking. "I'm fine." Imani shook her head, laughing softly. "That girl never runs out of energy. She's fire," Sterling murmured. "Just like her mother." Imani didn't respond, but her lips tightened into a smile she couldn't hide. Sterling glanced down at his plate, finally taking a bite, when a sudden shift in the atmosphere caught him. The laughter paused. Voices thinned. He looked up just in time to see Zoe wobble mid-run. Her steps slowed. Her smile faded. Sterling stood instinctively. Zoe turned around and took a few unsteady steps toward them. "Mommy, Daddy." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I feel funny." Her knees buckled. "Zoe!" Imani screamed, dropping her cup. Sterling ran. His heart thundered in his ears. He caught her just before she hit the grass, cradling her against his chest. Her arms hung limp. Her eyes fluttered half-closed. "Zoe! Zoe, baby!" Imani dropped to her knees beside them, clutching her daughter's hand. Sterling felt her forehead. It was clammy. Her skin was too pale. "Call 911-1." Someone yelled. Pastor Robinson rushed over, already dialing. Imani's hands trembled. "Zoe, open your eyes. Look at Mommy." Sterling didn't speak. His jaw clenched, arms wrapped around her tiny frame, afraid if he let go she'd disappear. A crowd formed quickly. A woman grabbed a cold bottle from the cooler and pressed it into Imani's hand to lay on Zoe's neck. Sterling kept whispering her name. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Stay with me." The siren came fast. By the time paramedics arrived, Imani was in shock. Sterling lifted Zoe into the gurney with the care of a man holding his whole world in his arms. One EMT asked, "Are you her parents?" Imani nodded. Sterling didn't even think. He just said, "Yes." They were loaded into the ambulance without another word. The ride was silent except for Zoe's soft breaths and the beeping of machines. Imani held Zoe's hand while Sterling sat opposite her, fists clenched on his knees. The moment they reached the hospital, doctors swept Zoe into a trauma room. Sterling tried to follow, but a nurse blocked him gently. "Wait here. We'll update you." The door closed, and for the first time in his adult life, Sterling Whitmore felt powerless. The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Sterling paced the floor, back and forth, arms folded tight across his chest. His mind ran loops. What if she never wakes up? What if they were too late? What if... Imani sat in one of the molded plastic chairs, her elbows on her knees, hands clasped like she was praying, but she wasn't saying a word. Her lips pressed together, her back stiff. Every time the double doors swung open, they both jerked their heads up. But it was never the doctor. Sterling had faced boardrooms, billion-dollar decisions, hostile takeovers. None of it scared him. But this made his bones shake. A nurse walked by and Sterling rushed toward her. "Please, someone has to tell us something." She gave a tight smile. "They're still running tests. Someone will come speak with you shortly." He nodded, helpless. He turned back to Imani. "I should have known something was wrong," she whispered. "She said she was tired last week. I thought it was just school, just growing. Sterling knelt beside her. Don't blame yourself. She's my daughter, she choked out, tears brimming. If I'd taken her in sooner. Imani, his voice cracked. Stop. You didn't do anything wrong. Her shoulders shook. She covered her mouth and sobbed quietly. Sterling slid beside her on the bench, gently wrapping an arm around her. She didn't push him away. They sat like that, silent, for what felt like hours. Eventually, a doctor in navy scrubs stepped out and approached. Miss Baker? Mr. Whitmore? They both stood instantly. The doctor's face was calm, but heavy. Sterling braced himself. I'm Dr. Hernandez, he said. I've been reviewing your daughter's test results. Zoe has a form of leukemia. It's aggressive but treatable. The words hit like bricks. Imani swayed slightly. Sterling reached out to steady her. Leukemia? Imani repeated, dazed. Like cancer? The doctor nodded. Yes. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. We caught it early, but she'll need to begin treatment right away. Sterling felt the floor tilt. How serious? He asked. Dr. Hernandez sighed gently. It will be a difficult road. Chemotherapy, possibly a bone marrow transplant if needed. But we've had success with children her age. She has a good chance, if we start now. Imani collapsed back into the chair. Her body trembled. Sterling crouched down in front of her again. I'm here, he whispered. We're going to fight this, together. Her eyes filled. She's just a baby. He looked at the doctor. What do you need from us? Consent forms, insurance, medical history. We'll run more tests to determine the next steps. She's in good hands. Sterling nodded quickly. Do whatever it takes. I'll cover any cost. Just save her. Dr. Hernandez nodded, offering a hand on Sterling's shoulder before walking away. Sterling turned back to Imani. She was staring straight ahead now, silent. I don't care about work, he said. Nothing else matters. I'm staying. I'm not leaving this hospital unless you tell me to. Imani wiped her face. I don't want you to leave. He sat beside her. Then, I'm right here. That was the moment the walls started to fall between them. Not with words, but with presence. Zoe would need both of them now. The room Zoe was placed in was small, but clean. One pale yellow wall held a cartoon mural. A digital monitor beeped steadily next to the bed. Zoe lay curled under a thin blanket, and 4 threaded into her tiny arm. Her eyes fluttered open and closed, too weak to speak. Her curls had been tied into a loose ponytail. Her little fingers twitched every now and then, as if reaching for something. Imani hadn't moved from the bedside since the nurse wheeled her in. Sterling stood behind her, silent, unsure what to do with his hands. He had never felt so out of place, and yet never so committed to staying put. A nurse stepped in with a soft voice. We'll start her treatment first thing in the morning. Tonight's about keeping her comfortable. One parent can sleep in the chair. Both of us are staying, Sterling said quickly. The nurse hesitated. We're only allowed to. She's not alone tonight, Imani said firmly. We're both staying. The nurse looked between them, saw the resolve, and nodded. I'll bring in extra blankets. Sterling pulled up a chair. Imani was already sitting, holding Zoe's hand. Silence sat heavy in the room, broken only by the low hum of machines and the occasional squeak of a nurse's shoes in the hallway. Zoe stirred. Sterling leaned in. I'm here, baby girl. We're both here. Zoe's lips moved faintly. Daddy? It was the first time she had ever said it without prompting. Imani gasped softly. Sterling reached out and gently cupped Zoe's small hand. Yes, sweetheart. I'm here. She didn't say anything else, just nestled deeper under the blanket and let his hand rest on hers. That night, the 3 of them shared a space none of them expected. Imani sat beside Zoe, whispering soft prayers. Sterling sat at her other side, watching the rise and fall of Zoe's chest like it was the only thing keeping his own heart beating. At some point after midnight, Imani fell asleep, her head resting on the hospital bed. Sterling watched her sleep. She looked exhausted, worn, but strong. She had carried this child alone. Through pregnancy, sleepless nights, school pickups, temperatures, laughter, tears, first words, and he had missed it all. He felt tears sting his eyes again, not because of guilt, but because of awe. Because somehow she had raised this brilliant little girl with no help from him, and still had the courage to let him back in. Imani stirred and looked up, startled. "Sorry," she mumbled. "No," he said softly. "You need rest." "I haven't had rest in 5 years," she said, her voice dry but honest. Sterling leaned forward. "I want to be clear. I'm not just here because of Zoe's diagnosis. I'm here because I should have never left." Imani didn't answer. She just stared at Zoe. Sterling continued. "I let pressure talk me out of the best thing that ever happened to me. And now, I'm scared. I've never been scared like this before." Imani wiped at her face. "Neither have I." He reached over gently, placed a blanket around her shoulders. "I don't expect you to forgive me tonight," he said. "But I need you to know, I'm not going anywhere." She glanced at him, eyes weary. "If you want to be in her life, Sterling, it's not about saying the right things. It's about showing up. Every day. I will. She's been through enough. I won't let anyone hurt her. Not even you. Not again." His voice broke. "I won't. I swear it." Zoe stirred again. Her tiny voice was no more than a whisper. "Mommy, Daddy." Imani moved first, pressing her forehead to her daughter's. Sterling leaned in beside her. "We're right here, baby," Imani whispered. Sterling added, "We're not going anywhere." As the machines beeped and the room dimmed, Zoe slept between them, still fighting, still holding on. And in that small room, something else began to grow. Not certainty, not forgiveness just yet, but something even more powerful. Hope. Buckhead was polished perfection on every corner. Clean streets lined with palm trees trucked in from Florida luxury. Boutiques bathed in gold lighting and gated neighborhoods that looked more like 5-star resorts than homes. One of those gates led to Sterling Whitmore's estate. The house sat on 3 acres, complete with an Olympic-sized pool, an outdoor fireplace bigger than most, apartments, and an imported marble kitchen that had hosted more catered dinners than cooked meals. Inside, silence stretched wide. Sterling walked through the open-concept living room after work, removed his watch, and dropped it on a black granite countertop. The faint ticking echoed too loud in the stillness. His phone buzzed. Calendar alerts, congratulations texts from board members, one reminder about a real estate negotiation. He ignored all of it. He loosened his tie and poured a drink. No staff tonight. He'd sent them home hours ago. He didn't want anyone pretending this house was warm. He turned on the TV, flipped through channels, sports, news, reality shows. Nothing held his attention. He turned it off. Sterling sat on the edge of the leather couch, elbows on his knees. On the wall above the fireplace was a portrait his mother insisted on gifting him, Sterling, in a tailored suit, standing with his father in front of the Whitmore Holdings headquarters. He stared at it for a long time. From the outside, it was everything a man could want. But at night, when the party invites stopped, when the business calls died down, when no gala was left to attend, what he felt was far from enough. After seeing Zoe, his daughter, everything had shifted. The silence that once felt normal now screamed at him. She should have been here. He should have been folding pajamas, picking out bedtime books, arguing over toothbrush time, watching cartoons in sweats. He should have known the softness of her curls, the rhythm of her laugh. Instead, he had cold glass walls. He pulled out his phone and stared at the screen. Imani's number was there now finally, but he didn't call. Not yet. Not while his own guilt was still this loud. He walked into his home office and stood by the giant window facing the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Zoe was asleep, and he wasn't there to kiss her goodnight. He pressed a hand against the glass, jaw tight. His life looked perfect, but it felt like a vacuum. All the money in the world couldn't buy the one thing he lost when he walked away from Imani. Family. On the opposite side of Atlanta, past the condos and country clubs, sat Southside's Glenfield Street, a neighborhood where car horns competed with gospel music, and neighbors didn't knock before entering if your door was cracked. Imani Baker's life was made of rhythm, faith, motherhood, and keeping things moving. She rose early before Zoe stirred, made coffee, packed lunches, braided Zoe's hair while quoting memory verses. They'd pray together at the doorway. Zoe would say, "Cover us, Lord," all day, and Imani would kiss her forehead and whisper, "Amen." Then came work. Imani juggled 2 jobs, the community center front desk and weekends at a local bookstore. She rarely had time to sit still. Bills came faster than paychecks, but she made it work. Her church family helped where they could. Her mother, though aging, offered moral support and soul food. Still, nights were hardest. Once Zoe was tucked into bed and the dishes were washed, Imani would finally collapse on the couch. No fancy marble counters or infinity pools, just thrifted furniture, a second-hand TV, and a prayer wall with sticky notes full of names. And somehow, it felt whole, because her daughter laughed here, because her community lifted her up, because she had purpose. Every Sunday, Greater Grace was her reset. Choir rehearsal on Thursday, Bible study on Wednesday, community drives on Saturdays. Church wasn't a building, it was a net, catching her on the days she felt like she was falling. Zoe had friends who ran barefoot in the yard, aunties who weren't related but still bought her birthday gifts, a pastor who knew her by name and had blessed her stomach while Zoe was still inside. Still, it wasn't easy. There were nights Imani cried quietly behind her bedroom door, when the rent was late, when Zoe got sick and she had no one to call, when she saw Sterling's face in her dreams and woke up wondering if he ever thought about them. But she never let Zoe see her break. Zoe believed their life was perfect, because Imani made it beautiful with what little they had. Love, that was always enough. Until now, until Sterling walked back in and Zoe called a stranger daddy. Now, everything was changing, and Imani didn't know if her heart was ready for the possibility that what she prayed for might be coming true. It started on campus. Spellman and Morehouse shared a library, and that's where it happened. Imani was buried in textbooks for her public health midterm. Sterling sat a few tables away, arguing with a finance major over profit-loss margins. He noticed her first, not because she was loud. Imani wasn't. It was the way she tilted her head when reading, her lips moving softly with each line. Her gold necklace caught the light. Her notebook was filled with highlighter colors and handwritten prayers in the margins. He found a reason to sit closer the next day. The third day, he asked for a pen. The fourth, they had lunch. By the second month, they were inseparable. He took her to jazz nights and rooftop poetry events. She invited him to Sunday service and introduced him to sweet tea the way her auntie made it, strong and unapologetic. They laughed deep, talked late, kissed under trees when finals got too heavy. He'd never met anyone like her. She never tried to fit into his world. She made hers so rich, he wanted to be a part of it. But their worlds were never built to hold each other. Sterling's parents found out just before junior year. Imani was too different, too loud in faith, too from the wrong side of town. They called it concern, said it would derail his future. He told them off, for a while, but pressure chipped away at him. He started making excuses, skipping Bible study nights, avoiding her dorm, answering her prayers with silence, until one day, he ended it. No explanation, just a broken heart left in her hands. Imani had cried for weeks, then prayed for months, then moved on in silence. 2 weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. She tried calling once. The number was disconnected. She decided that if he'd walked away from her, he'd walk away from the baby too. So she let go. She raised Zoe alone, never telling her the full story. But Sterling never forgot. Every business win, every gala toast, every headline with his name felt like a shadow when he thought about the girl with the highlighters and the prayer-filled notebooks. Now, years later, that love was still alive. Buried maybe, bruised, but not broken. And fate, perhaps God, had brought them face to face again. Sterling's calendar was booked to the minute. Quarterly reports, capital strategy meetings, 2 board interviews, but one appointment sat there blinking quietly on Thursday at 4 p.m. He almost skipped it. His assistant, Nadia, reminded him twice. "They're expecting you. This isn't just a PR move anymore. Your face is on the flyer, sir." He glanced at the screen. The tour had been planned months ago, part of a corporate pledge to support after-school programs in underserved neighborhoods. It would take an hour, tops. Sterling grabbed his coat and told the driver to take the long way. The car wound through downtown, away from glass towers and valet signs, deeper into Atlanta's south side. As they turned down Glenfield Avenue, the scenery changed. Chain link, fences, old corner stores, porches where kids played with scooters. When they pulled up to the center, Sterling paused. It was small. A square 2-story brick building with a mural of bright-colored handprints and community heels in bold blue letters. But it was clean, freshly painted. A few parents stood near the doorway chatting. Inside, he could hear laughter echoing from the gym. The moment he stepped through the doors, the scent of crayons and Lysol hit him. An older man in a red polo walked over, extending a hand. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm Director Lewis. Appreciate you coming down here." "Of course," Sterling replied. "Glad to finally see it in person." They began the tour. Classrooms with folding chairs, tutoring pods, donated laptops, a kitchen that served dinner on weekdays. "Our programs serve over 80 kids each week," Lewis explained. "A lot of these families count on us for more than just academics." Sterling nodded, noting how far this world was from his marble office floors. A few boys waved at him from the game room. He smiled, the gesture unfamiliar but genuine. Just as Lewis turned the corner toward the back lobby, he said, "We got a phenomenal team at the front desk, too. One of them's been with us over 4 years. Strong, dependable, single mom. She's got a beautiful little girl. You'll like her." Sterling wasn't listening. He'd just turned and seen a woman behind the check-in counter, head down, flipping through a stack of forms. His entire body locked up. Lewis kept talking, unaware. "You know, most of our donors never even show up, but when people come here and meet the families we serve, it puts a face to the number. Changes everything. It already had. Because that wasn't just any staffer. That was Imani Baker." Sterling's heart stopped. He stepped back as if bracing himself. 6 years of silence narrowed into one moment, one face. She looked older now, confident, composed, but still had that quiet fire in her eyes. She didn't see him yet. He hadn't seen her since the day he walked away in college, pressured by expectations. Scared of losing his inheritance, too weak to fight for the woman he loved. He never imagined this was where they'd meet again. Not here. Not like this. Sterling tried to breathe. He had faced high-stakes negotiations, mergers worth hundreds of millions, but nothing prepared him for this moment. Imani finally looked up. Their eyes met. Her pen stilled. Her mouth parted slightly, but no words came. For a beat, the hallway and the staff noise faded behind a wall of silence. "Sterling?" she said, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. He stepped forward slowly, his voice unsure. "Imani." Lewis stopped, confused. "You two know each other?" Neither answered. Imani stood. "Director, could you give us a moment?" "Sure," Lewis said, still puzzled. "I'll be in the conference room." Once he walked away, the silence became heavier. "I didn't know you worked here," Sterling said. "I didn't know you funded this place," she replied. They stood a few feet apart, but it felt like a decade of distance stretched between them. Imani crossed her arms. "What are you doing here, Sterling?" He looked around, searching for steady footing. "Tour, PR thing. I didn't expect to see you. I didn't expect you to walk back into my life," she said quietly. "But here we are." Just then, a child's voice rang out from down the hallway. "Mommy, look!" A little girl darted into view, waving a drawing in one hand. She was 5, maybe 6, with soft curls pulled into a bun and pink, sparkly sneakers. Sterling stared. The breath drained from his chest. The little girl had blue eyes. His blue eyes. She ran straight to Imani, holding out the drawing. "I made hearts for you." Imani knelt, smiling softly. "You did amazing, baby." Sterling stared, unable to move. The little girl turned toward him, curious. "Hi," she said. He crouched slowly. "Hi, who are you?" she asked innocently. Imani's voice was shaky. "Zoe, baby, remember I told you about your daddy?" Zoe tilted her head. "The one who had to leave?" Imani nodded. "Well," she whispered, "he's here now." Zoe turned back to Sterling, studying his face carefully. "Are you really him?" He nodded. "Yes, I'm your dad." Zoe looked up at Imani, then back at him. Then she stepped forward and hugged him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sterling's world stopped. Sterling dropped to his knees and held Zoe tightly. She fit into his arms like she had always belonged there. He felt the tears before he could stop them. "I didn't know," he whispered into her curls. "I'm so sorry." Zoe looked up. "It's okay. You're here now." Imani wiped a tear from her cheek and sat back down. When Zoe went back to the coloring corner, Sterling finally turned to Imani fully. "You tried to tell me, didn't you?" "I called once," she said. "The number was disconnected. I had no idea. I swear, I would have come back." Imani looked away. "But you didn't fight for me back then. You chose them." Sterling swallowed hard. "I chose wrong." They sat in silence for a moment. "She's amazing," he said. "You did an incredible job. I did the best I could, with what I had." He sat beside her. "Can I be in her life?" Imani nodded slowly. "We'll take it one step at a time. She deserves that." Sterling looked down at the floor, then back up at her. "And what about us?" Imani didn't answer right away. "Start with her," she said gently. "We'll figure the rest out later." He nodded, but a flicker of hope lit in his chest. Later that evening, Imani stood at the center's exit doors holding Zoe's hand. Sterling stood near his car, waiting. Imani hesitated, then called out, "We're going to the church's spring picnic this Sunday." He stepped closer. "Yeah?" "It's just food, games, family stuff," she said. "Zoe loves it." Sterling smiled. "You think it's okay if I come?" "She already asked if you would," Imani said. "I think it's time. I'll be there, I promise." Imani opened the back door and helped Zoe into her car seat. Sterling leaned down. "I'll see you Sunday, Glitter Queen." Zoe giggled. "Bring juice." Sterling grinned. "You got it." As the car pulled away, he stood there for a while, watching them go, his heart fuller than it had felt in years. This wasn't a business deal. This was his real life, finally unfolding. And he wouldn't miss it again. If you've ever watched someone rediscover what truly matters in life, comment "real love" below. The warm breeze carried the scent of grilled ribs, baked beans, and sweet rolls. Kids laughed from the bounce house, uncles argued over dominoes, and women danced beside tables stacked with church-made casseroles. Sterling stood to the side, watching Zoe twirl in her polka-dot dress, arms wide like a butterfly. It was the first time in years that he'd felt peace. Imani sat nearby under a pop-up canopy with other mothers from Greater Grace. Her laugh blended with the gospel music humming through portable speakers. Her eyes flicked toward Zoe often, watchful, warm, motherly. Sterling couldn't stop smiling. His sneakers were dusty, his button-up shirt slightly wrinkled, but it didn't matter. Zoe had insisted he come dressed fun like church people, so he did. "Daddy, watch me," Zoe called out, her small hands raised like wings. Sterling stepped closer. "I see you, baby girl." She giggled and sprinted toward the other side of the lawn to join a game of freeze tag. Imani came over, handing him a plate. "Mac and cheese. If you don't eat Sister Bernice's, she'll give you the side eye for the rest of your life." He laughed and took a forkful. "It's good. You barely tasted it." "I'm distracted." She followed his eyes to Zoe. "You're smitten," Imani said softly. "I never thought I'd feel this again," he admitted. "And definitely not like this." She didn't answer, but her gaze lingered on him a moment longer than expected. Across the grass, Zoe danced in a circle. But then, mid-spin, her steps faltered. She paused, stumbled. Her arms fell limp to her sides. "Mommy." Her voice barely audible. "Daddy." Sterling moved before Imani did. He reached Zoe just in time to catch her as her knees buckled. Imani was beside them in seconds, her heart in her throat. "Zoe." Sterling cradled her. Hey, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Zoe's eyes rolled slightly. She moaned, but her limbs were heavy. Imani pulled out her phone, voice shaking. "I'm calling 911. Nearby adults surrounded them, backing away to give space. Sterling whispered, "Stay with me, baby girl. I got you." Sirens wailed in the distance minutes later. By the time the ambulance arrived, Zoe was pale, her breath shallow. Sterling rode in the back, gripping her hand, tears silently sliding down his face. Imani sat across from him, shaking. The laughter, music, sunshine, it was gone, replaced with dread. The picnic would be remembered for something else now. The ER buzzed with urgency as nurses wheeled Zoe into a room. Imani followed with trembling hands. Sterling was right behind her, gripping the back of the gurney. Once Zoe was stabilized, they were told to wait. Hours passed. Imani paced the sterile hallway while Sterling stood in the corner, fists clenched. Finally, a doctor emerged. "Miss Baker, Mr. Whitmore?" They both stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Hernandez. We ran a series of blood panels. Your daughter is very anemic and her white blood cell count is dangerously high. Based on the results, we believe Zoe has acute lymphoblastic leukemia." Imani's knees gave out. Sterling caught her, guiding her gently into a chair. "What does that mean?" he asked hoarsely. "She has cancer," the doctor said. "But this type is treatable. Children her age often respond well to chemotherapy, though the road will be long. We need to start as soon as possible. Imani was frozen. Sterling asked, "How soon is soon?" "Tonight. She'll need a central line placed for treatment and further scans to determine staging. I know this is overwhelming, but time is critical." Sterling nodded, holding Imani's hand without realizing it. She didn't pull away. They signed the paperwork. Zoe was admitted into pediatric oncology. Machines beeped. Nurses whispered. Sterling stood beside the bed, while Imani sat on the edge, brushing curls from Zoe's forehead. Their baby girl looked so small, so fragile. "Why her?" Imani whispered. Sterling didn't have answers. He just reached out and took Imani's hand again. And for the first time in years, she let him. The hospital days blurred together. Sterling cleared his calendar completely. He told his assistant to cancel all meetings, shift all calls. The company could wait. Zoe couldn't. He brought coloring books, puzzles, and stuffed animals. Imani brought scripture cards, socks with rainbows, and Zoe's favorite pink blanket from home. They never left the room. When Zoe cried during blood draws, they both held her. When she threw up from the chemo, they cleaned it together. Sterling watched Imani in awe. She knew every nurse's name, every medication schedule, every question to ask. She stayed calm even when the beeping monitors spiked. But he saw the tears she cried in the hallway. Late one night, Imani broke down. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I am too," he admitted. She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, no longer asking permission. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying." "I never should have left," he said. Their old pain resurfaced, but not to wound, just to heal. "I was young," she said, "but I would have fought for us." "I know," he murmured. "I was scared. I listened to people who didn't understand love." "You missed everything," she said. "I did," he agreed. "I won't let you miss anything else." He kissed her temple. That night, they both stayed beside Zoe's bed. Together, the space between them wasn't broken anymore. It was beginning to mend. Days passed. Zoe's strength flickered in and out. One afternoon, after a nap, she stirred and reached blindly across the bed. "Daddy." Sterling froze. Imani turned. Zoe's voice was weak. "Where's Daddy?" Sterling rushed over and took her hand. "I'm here, Princess." Her eyes opened slightly. "I missed you." He brushed her curls. "I've missed you your whole life." Zoe squeezed his finger. "Don't go." "I'm not going anywhere." Across the bed, Imani wiped tears silently. The word Daddy had changed everything. It wasn't just a name now. It was a promise. Sterling leaned in and whispered, "I love you, Zoe." "I love you too." Imani stepped over and sat beside them, placing one hand on each of theirs. Together, they created a circle around her, a family, finally forming. And when Zoe drifted back to sleep, both parents stayed right there, hands linked, hearts slowly stitching together. Sterling hadn't been back to his office since Zoe collapsed. Not once. His phone vibrated nonstop. Emails flooded his inbox. Board members sent texts. His assistant called, then called again. But none of that mattered now. He sat in a hospital recliner next to his daughter's bed, shoelaces untied, the same hoodie thrown over yesterday's shirt. His laptop was still zipped up in his leather bag. Unopened. Ignored. "Mr. Whitmore," Nadia had said during their last call, "the investment committee is panicking. They need you on the third quarter call." Sterling stared through the window, watching the pink sunrise spill across the hospital's parking lot. "Tell them the CEO's unavailable," he said quietly. "Unavailable where?" "Where I should have been from the beginning." He hung up. Zoe stirred in the bed, blinking open her eyes. Imani rose quickly and poured her a small glass of water, gently supporting her shoulders. "Mommy," she whispered. "Is Daddy here?" "I'm right here, baby," Sterling said, moving to her side. He smoothed a hand over her forehead and kissed it. "I never left." He didn't. Sterling rearranged his world to orbit around that room. Hospital food trays became his breakfast. Nurses knew him by name. The night shift security guard began greeting him like staff. He traded power suits for sweatshirts and conference rooms for coloring books. One night, Zoe fell asleep mid-sentence while explaining her crayon drawing. Sterling didn't move for hours after, afraid even shifting might wake her. Imani glanced at him. "You're tired. I'll rest when she's home." "Sterling," she said, softer. "You don't have to prove anything." He looked at her. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm making up for everything." She didn't argue, because she could see it too. This wasn't about guilt anymore. It was love. Real, sacrificial love. Word spread quickly through Greater Grace. Zoe Baker, Imani's daughter, was fighting leukemia. The single mom who never asked for much now had her hands full. So the church showed up. On the second day of chemo, Pastor Robinson came with a prayer shawl and sat beside Zoe's bed reading Psalms. On the fourth day, Sister Claudine dropped off 3 trays of baked spaghetti and a gallon of sweet tea. On the fifth, Imani's front porch was lined with bags of groceries and a handwritten card that read, "We got you. Rest when you can." Even members who hadn't spoken to Imani in months reached out, checking in, offering rides, leaving gas money tucked in church bulletins. Imani blinked back tears as she read message after message. "You're not alone in this," Pastor Robinson said during his visit. "This church don't just pray. We show up." Sterling stood awkwardly as the pastor clapped him on the back. "We see you too," the pastor added. Sterling nodded. "Thank you." It was unfamiliar, being surrounded by people who offered help without angle. No business deals, no expectations, just love. Even Sterling's pride softened. He pulled Imani aside one afternoon and said, "Your church, they don't just help, they believe." "They always have," she replied. Later that evening, Zoe sat up long enough to play Go Fish with one of the youth ministry volunteers. Imani sipped lukewarm coffee on the edge of the room while Sterling fixed Zoe's blanket. He glanced back at her. "You built this village." She smiled tiredly. "It wasn't just me. God sent people who didn't quit." Sterling exhaled. "I see that now." And he meant it, because in the quiet corners of that hospital room, it wasn't just medical care keeping them strong. It was community. The doctor entered the room with a clipboard in hand and the expression that always came before a serious conversation. Sterling straightened up immediately. "Miss Baker, Mr. Whitmore," Dr. Hernandez said, "Zoe's chemo protocol has started. Well, but based on her lab responses, we'll likely need a bone marrow transplant." Imani's heart sank. Sterling stood slowly. "What does that involve?" "We'll search the National Registry for a donor," Dr. Hernandez explained. "But it can take weeks, sometimes months. If a family member is a match, we can move faster." Sterling stepped forward without hesitation. "Test me, today." "Are you sure?" Imani asked, shocked. "I've never been more sure." Within hours, Sterling sat with a nurse drawing vials of blood for HLA testing. Days passed. Every time the door opened, he looked up, hoping for news. Finally, Dr. Hernandez returned. "Sterling, we received your results. You're a partial match. Unfortunately, not ideal for transplant." Sterling clenched his jaw. "But I'm close?" "Yes, but not close enough." He sat back in his chair, crushed. "I'll pay for anything, overseas, private labs, whatever you need. We're already expanding the search," the doctor reassured him. "It's just a waiting game now." Imani came into the hallway where Sterling sat staring at the floor. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I wanted to fix this," he said, voice raw. "With my body, my blood. I wanted to save her." Imani sat beside him and reached for his hand. "You showed up," she said. "You gave everything. That matters." He looked at her, eyes wet. "It's not enough." "It is to her," she whispered. And when they walked back into the room, hand in hand, Zoe looked up from her bed and smiled. "Daddy, want to hear my song?" He sat beside her, nodded, and listened. Because even if he couldn't give her marrow, he would give her everything else. One night after a long stretch of lab work and fever spikes, Zoe finally slept soundly. Imani sat by the window, arms folded, her face bathed in streetlight glow. Sterling walked over, handed her a cup of chamomile tea. She accepted it silently. After a few minutes, she spoke. "I used to imagine what kind of man you'd become." He sat across from her. "Were your guesses any good?" She chuckled lightly. "Not even close." Sterling leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Good or bad?" "Neither," she said. "You just became someone I never expected." He met her gaze. "I'm trying to become someone Zoe deserves." "You're getting there." Sterling looked down at his hands. I wasn't strong enough back then. I let voices in my life silence my own. Imani nodded. I hated you for a long time. I hated me too. She softened. But watching you now, she continued. You hold her hand through every treatment. You sing to her when she's sick. You canceled everything just to be here. I couldn't be anywhere else. I know, she whispered. That's what changed. Sterling's throat tightened. What do you mean? You didn't just show up, Sterling. You stayed. You saw the hard parts. You didn't run. Tears stung her eyes. I see who you are now, she said quietly. He reached over and took her hand gently. I still love you, he admitted. I never stopped. Imani didn't respond at first. She squeezed his hand instead. It wasn't a declaration, but it was a beginning. The sound of hospital monitors, once background noise, had become a rhythm of survival. Zoe's treatment was progressing, slowly, but she was fighting, and Sterling and Imani were there for every needle, nap, and whisper of pain. It had been a week since Sterling's bone marrow test results. A match hadn't been found yet, but hope lingered. On a cloudy Thursday morning, the door to Zoe's hospital room creaked open. Sterling looked up from the small book he was reading to Zoe. His parents stood there. Conrad Whitmore in a three-piece suit that didn't fit the hospital's spirit, and Vivian in soft beige with pearls around her neck. Sterling, Conrad said, clearing his throat. Vivian wanted to see the child. Zoe sat up in bed slightly, blinking at the strangers. Imani, seated next to her daughter, instantly tensed. Vivian stepped closer. She's lovely, she said with a forced smile. Looks just like you did at that age. Sterling stood. This is Zoe. Vivian smiled. Hello, sweetheart. Zoe blinked slowly and waved politely. Hi. Imani placed a protective arm around Zoe's shoulders. Conrad scanned the room. This place isn't adequate for a child undergoing serious treatment. Sterling frowned. What are you talking about? This hospital is the best in the region. Vivian leaned in gently. We're just concerned. Zoe deserves private care, elite specialists. The kind of resources only a family like ours can provide consistently. Imani's expression turned to stone. We've been managing just fine. Conrad's voice remained calm, almost corporate. Ms. Baker, please understand, this isn't personal. We only want what's best for the child. If Zoe were in our custody, she'd have access to world-class facilities, therapy, wellness retreats. Sterling's hand curled into a fist. Stop. Son. No, you don't get to do this. Imani has raised Zoe with love and strength. You didn't even know she existed until 2 weeks ago. You don't get to swoop in and decide what's best. Vivian sighed. Sterling, you're emotionally involved. You're not thinking clearly. You're right, he snapped. I'm finally thinking clearly. I'm putting my daughter and her mother first. This isn't about money. It's about love and stability. Conrad stepped back, stiff. We're hiring legal counsel. We'll be filing for temporary custody. Imani stood up now, her voice steady but furious. You think money gives you ownership over my child? This isn't about ownership. Yes, it is, she said. And it won't work. Not this time. Vivian looked remorseful but didn't intervene. They turned and walked out. Zoe looked up, confused. Mommy? Who were they? Imani smoothed her hair. People who don't understand what family means. Sterling sat back down, his face pale but determined. This isn't over, he said. No, Imani replied. It's just beginning. The legal petition arrived the next morning. Sterling opened the envelope in the hospital cafeteria, jaw tightening as he read the contents. The language was clinical, polished, and cold. The Whitmores were petitioning for joint temporary custody of Zoe, citing Imani's unmarried status, limited financial means, and history of withholding paternal information. Sterling gripped the page so tightly it wrinkled. They're trying to erase her, he said under his breath. Later, in Imani's apartment, they sat on her modest couch, papers spread across the coffee table. They're questioning whether I'm fit to parent my own child, she said, voice low. Sterling nodded. It's disgusting. Imani scoffed. You know what this really is, right? He looked up. This isn't just about class, Sterling. It's about race. I'm a single black mother from the South Side. You're the wealthy white son of a prominent family. They think they can steamroll me. Sterling's throat went dry. They won't. Imani looked at him. Have you really cut ties with them? I'm about to. She stared at him. "You need to know, if you stand with me on this, you'll lose their support, maybe even your inheritance." He didn't flinch. "They can have the money. I'll take my daughter." For the first time, she believed him. Word of the petition spread quickly. Imani's church family closed ranks. "They want to buy custody," Sister Claudine said. "Not on our watch." Sterling stood before the congregation that Sunday, speaking plainly. "I may have been born a Whitmore, but I've become Zoe's father. That means I show up. That means I fight for what's right." Pastor Robinson nodded solemnly. Later, he pulled Sterling aside. "You ready for this storm, son?" Sterling nodded. "I walked away once. I won't do it again." The lines were drawn. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a battle of dignity. Court was set within a week. Sterling walked into the Fulton County Courthouse beside Imani. She wore a simple blue dress. He wore a dark blazer, no tie. They were greeted by Conrad and Vivian's legal team, 3 attorneys from an elite Buckhead firm. Imani's lawyer, a respected advocate from the Community Legal Center, was ready. During testimony, Conrad's side framed Imani as emotionally unpredictable, religiously rigid, and financially incapable. They introduced photos of Zoe's apartment, her school, anything to paint the picture of insufficiency. Sterling boiled with rage. When his turn came to speak, he stood slowly and walked to the witness stand. "Mr. Whitmore," the opposing lawyer began, "as Zoe's father, Don, you believe she'd benefit from the Whitmore family's resources?" Sterling's jaw clenched. "Zoe needs love, not leverage. She needs parents who show up. Imani has done that every single day for 6 years. She didn't have staff. She didn't have generational wealth. But she gave Zoe everything. And yet, she kept Zoe a secret from you." "I left," Sterling said evenly, "and I never looked back. That's on me, not her. Do you believe Miss Baker can provide a stable future for your daughter?" He turned to the judge. "I've spent 6 years in boardrooms with the most powerful people in this city, and not a single one of them has shown half the strength I've seen in Imani Baker. She's the most stable, reliable, courageous person I know." Imani covered her mouth to stifle a gasp. "And if I have anything to say about it, she'll never have to fight alone again." The judge looked down at her papers. "Mr. Whitmore, you may make a final statement before I render a decision." Sterling stood. He didn't read from notes. He didn't clear his throat. He looked at his parents, then at Imani, then at Zoe, sitting quietly in the back with a support worker. "My parents taught me about legacy, about family name, about image. But they didn't teach me about fatherhood. I had to learn that when Zoe looked up at me with eyes that matched mine." He turned to the judge. "I spent years chasing things that didn't matter. Titles, properties, perfection. But none of it held meaning until I saw my daughter in a hospital bed and realized that money can't hold her hand when she's scared." He paused. "I've made mistakes. I've run from responsibility. I believed lies about what makes a man worthy. But I'm done running." He looked at Imani. "She raised Zoe without me, with nothing but strength and faith and love. And if the court believes that money makes someone a better parent, then I'll give mine up gladly, because I'd rather be broke and present than rich and irrelevant in my daughter's life." The courtroom fell silent. Even Conrad blinked hard, turning his head slightly. The judge folded her hands. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore." Later that afternoon, the ruling was read. The custody petition was denied. Conrad and Vivian left the courthouse without speaking a word. Outside, Sterling took Imani's hand in front of the cameras and church members who had gathered. "You stood up for me," she whispered. "I stood up for us," he replied. "If you believe love is stronger than status, comment family first below and share this with someone who needs this message." It had been 3 days since the judge denied the Whitmore petition. The air outside the hospital was thick with summer heat, but for the first time in weeks, Sterling felt like he could exhale. The press had left. The legal threats had vanished. And inside room 416, Zoe had just finished a popsicle and was telling Imani how she wanted to braid her doll's hair like Miss Sharon at church. Sterling stood in the hallway outside, pacing softly. His suit jacket was draped over one arm, the tie long gone. He kept checking the time, not because he was in a rush, but because he hadn't broken out of old habits yet. But there was nowhere else to be. This hallway, that room, this family, this was his whole world now. Imani stepped out quietly, a tissue in hand. Her eyes were misty, but not sad. "She's finally resting," Sterling nodded. Good. She needs it. There was a beat of silence between them. You've barely said anything since court, she said, watching him. I've been processing. Imani crossed her arms gently. And, he looked at her fully. And I meant every word I said in there. I know you did. Sterling leaned against the wall. They haven't called. My guess? They won't. Not for a while. They'll come around, he said. Eventually. But until they do, Zoe stays with you. Imani blinked. You're not asking for joint custody? Sterling shook his head. Not yet. You've done this alone for 6 years. You built her world. I'm not walking in and rearranging it. Imani swallowed. That's unexpected. I'm not here to dominate, he said. I'm here to serve. Her lips parted slightly. I'll be involved, he added. School pickup, church plays, all of it. But she lives with you, and I support everything. There was silence again, but this time it was reverent. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded. You gave me a daughter. The least I can do is give you peace. Imani stepped closer. And what about us? Sterling paused. That's the part I'm still hoping for, he whispered. August melted into September. The air cooled. The trees in Atlanta turned bronze at the edges. And Zoe, tiny warrior Zoe, began smiling again. Her color came back slowly. The bruising faded from her arms. Her hair began growing back in wispy patches, and her appetite returned with full force. One morning, she devoured 2 helpings of oatmeal and demanded pancakes. Sterling high-fived her from across the breakfast tray. That's my girl. Imani laughed. You spoil her. She deserves it. The hospital staff had never seen anything like the Baker Whitmore transformation. Zoe's recovery was fast, fueled by faith and constant care. Nurses made paper crowns for her. Volunteers brought paint sets and stuffed unicorns. Sterling had a new routine now. He woke up in Imani's guest room, made coffee, braided Zoe's doll's hair while Imani packed snacks, and walked Zoe down the hallway to the oncology wing with both her hands in theirs. And one evening, as Zoe laughed through a puppet show Sterling performed, with socks, Imani stood in the doorway, arms folded, heart full. You're good at this. He glanced back. Socks or fatherhood? She smiled. Both. When Zoe was discharged and sent home for outpatient recovery, a celebration awaited. The church threw a small cookout. Pastor Robinson gave Zoe a special prayer. Imani's neighbors decorated their porch with balloons. Even Sterling's old college roommates sent a gift basket. Zoe beamed in the center of it all. And later that night, after the laughter died down, and Zoe was asleep in her own bed for the first time in weeks, Imani and Sterling sat on the porch, watching the stars peek through the clouds. She's gonna make it, Sterling whispered. She already did, Imani said. Because of both of us. He reached for her hand again. And she didn't let go. It was the second Saturday in October when it finally happened. Zoe was at her godmother's house for the night. Imani had hesitated, but Zoe had begged for a sleepover and Sterling agreed. Go, he said. We'll be fine. The apartment felt quiet without her. Imani curled on the couch, blanket draped over her legs. Sterling handed her a cup of ginger tea and sat across from her. You're nervous, he said. A little. I know I have no right to say this, he began, but I've wanted to talk to you without interruptions. Just you and me. No hospital. No court. She nodded, waiting. I still remember our first date, he said. You brought your own lunch and wouldn't let me pay. I didn't trust you yet, she replied. I knew I loved you when you took me to your church picnic and made me hold your little cousin's hand like we were married. She laughed. That was a test. I failed back then, he admitted. But I wouldn't now. Imani's expression softened. I never stopped loving you, Sterling said. I buried it. I ignored it. But it never went away. Imani's chest rose slowly. I know I hurt you, he said. But I want to spend every day showing you I've changed. People say that, she whispered. Then vanish. I don't need a second chance to date you, he said. I want a second chance to choose you. All of you. Imani wiped a tear. Sterling, I'm not asking for an answer tonight. Just your truth. She looked at him long and hard, then whispered, I never stopped loving you either. Forgiveness didn't come in a single moment. It came in pieces. The morning Sterling made Zoe's lunch without being asked. The night he picked up Imani's favorite takeout and remembered the extra sauce she always forgot to ask for. The day he fixed the leaky faucet in her kitchen without waiting for credit. It came when he apologized again, not for what he did, but for not being man enough to stay. It came when he sat through Sunday service without checking his phone, when he stood next to Imani as the pastor spoke on love that endures all things. One evening, as they folded laundry together in Imani's living room, she looked at him and asked, "Did you mean everything you said, even now that the storm's passed?" He nodded. "Especially now." Imani set the towel down. "Then let's start fresh." He leaned in slightly. "How fresh?" She smiled. "Dinner, Wednesday night. No talk of hospitals, no court papers, just us." "Deal," he said. Their first official dinner happened at a quiet soul food spot Zoe adored. No candles, no photographers, just Sterling, Imani, and the girl who called them both home. By Christmas, Zoe was healthier than ever, running down the hallway in her pajamas while Sterling helped Imani put up decorations. Imani leaned against the doorframe, watching him, watching them, and for the first time in years her heart didn't ache. It felt healed, whole, ready to begin again. The fall air smelled sweeter than usual. Crisp leaves fell gently along the sidewalk as Sterling pulled into the driveway of Imani's apartment building. But this wasn't an ordinary ride home. Zoe sat in the back seat, clutching a small stuffed bunny, wearing a stronger-than-cancer hoodie and glitter sneakers. Her curls were braided tight with yellow beads. Her cheeks had color again. Her eyes danced. She was cancer-free. "Are you ready?" Imani asked softly. Zoe nodded. "I missed my bed, and my dolls, and my window stars." Sterling leaned over from the front seat. "We got you new glow-in-the-dark ones, too." Zoe gasped. "Really?" He winked. "With hearts and moons." Imani's eyes watered. This moment, this life. It felt like resurrection. Neighbors stood outside with signs. "Welcome home, Zoe," in block letters. A few kids threw confetti. Sister Claudine led a prayer on the porch. Imani unlocked the door, and Zoe ran in like she'd never left, hugging furniture, opening kitchen cabinets just to see if her cereal was still there. Sterling leaned against the doorway, laughing softly. "Feels good to be back," he said. Imani nodded. "Feels like grace." That night, they unpacked medical bags, folded new clothes, and tucked away pill bottles that now only served as memories. Zoe ate macaroni from her favorite pink bowl and asked if they could paint tomorrow. Sterling and Imani shared a look over the dinner table. They were doing this, not out of obligation, but because they finally had the chance to live what they lost. Zoe's body had healed. Now it was time to let the home follow. Sterling didn't force his presence. He started with small things, helping Zoe with her math homework after dinner, replacing the broken lamp in the hallway, refilling the fridge without being asked. One night, he fixed a loose cabinet handle in the kitchen. "Since when do you know how to use a drill?" Imani teased. "I YouTubed it." She smiled. "Effort looks good on you." He began staying later after Zoe's bedtime, reading to her from the hallway bookshelf, then falling asleep on the living room couch with a throw blanket and a half-watched cooking show playing. Zoe loved the routine. "Daddy makes the pancakes fluffier," she declared one morning. Imani raised a brow. "Excuse me. I said what I said." Zoe giggled. Soon, it became habit. Sterling cooking breakfast, Imani packing lunches, Zoe brushing her teeth while both parents danced to Marvin Gaye in the kitchen. Imani noticed something shift in Sterling, too. He laughed more. He worried less. He didn't talk about work anymore. One evening, he asked, "What would you think if I downsized?" "Your company?" "My life," he said. "Something smaller, simpler, something that fits this." Imani looked around their modest space. "You'd trade the mansion for this?" "I'd trade the whole world to stay close to y'all." She believed him. That weekend, he brought over a few boxes, a couple books, clothes, his record player. Zoe asked, "Does this mean Daddy lives here now?" Imani smiled gently. "He's getting there." Sterling looked at Imani, and she didn't look away. Imani hadn't built her walls overnight. They were made of real moments, Sterling leaving, unanswered calls, nights, rocking Zoe alone at 3 a.m., birthdays without a father in sight. so she didn't let those walls crumble easily. But she noticed the cracks. Sterling folding laundry without being asked. Sterling rubbing her shoulders while she graded student assignments. Sterling singing badly on purpose to make Zoe laugh. One night, after Zoe had fallen asleep watching a cartoon marathon, Sterling and Imani sat on the fire escape. Stars dotted the dark sky above Southside. "You ever think about the what-ifs?" Sterling asked. Imani took a sip of her tea. "Used to. Me too," he said. "But lately, I've been more grateful for the now." She looked at him. "I don't always know how to trust this. I don't expect you to trust overnight." He reached over, gently brushing a loose braid from her face. "But I'll wait as long as it takes." Imani didn't speak. She just let the touch linger. 2 weeks later, she reached for his hand at church during a song. No hesitation. The following night, when Zoe fell asleep between them during movie night, Imani didn't move away when their shoulders touched. And one evening, just before bedtime, Zoe whispered, "Mommy, do you still love Daddy?" Imani kissed her forehead. "Yes," she said. She realized then, she wasn't just saying it. She felt it, and it didn't scare her anymore. The night was slow and quiet. Zoe had spent the evening with her godmother again. Sterling and Imani had the place to themselves. No distractions, no emergencies, just silence filled with peace. Sterling made dinner, spaghetti, the only thing he'd mastered without a recipe. Imani laughed at the mess he made, but kissed his cheek anyway. They danced in the kitchen to a soft vinyl playing in the corner. Al Green, low and slow. When the dishes were done, when the lights were dimmed, when the air felt warmer than the season, Sterling took her hand and whispered, "Come sit with me." They curled on the couch, her head on his chest, his arm around her waist. She could hear the steady rhythm of his heart, could feel the strength in his silence. "You good?" he asked. She nodded. "I've been waiting for this," he whispered. Imani looked up at him. "What?" "Peace. With you." She didn't answer with words. She kissed him. Not hurried, not searching, just full. Later they walked into the bedroom together. No rush, no performance, just a slow shedding of time, clothes, and the space between them. They lay down together for the first time in years. No tension, no guilt, just limbs entwined, two bodies, familiar, changed whole. Her head found its place against his chest. His hand found hers under the covers. They didn't speak again until sleep took them. And when morning came, the sun found them the way love had, slowly, quietly, permanently. The sun hung golden over the lawn of Greater Grace Church as laughter and gospel harmonies filled the air. The annual spring picnic was in full bloom, tables covered in floral cloths, grills sizzling, folding chairs, scattered around a rented bounce house, and church aunties handing out slices of red velvet cake. Zoe ran barefoot across the grass, her curls flying as she chased bubbles blown by Deacon Jerome's grandkids. Her giggle floated louder than the choir music playing through the speakers. Sterling stood under the same oak tree where it all began, where Zoe collapsed months ago and turned his world upside down. But today, that spot wasn't marked by fear. It was about to become the place where everything changed again. He wiped his palms on his jeans and looked over at Pastor Robinson, who gave him a thumbs up. A picnic table nearby had been transformed with white linens, sunflowers, and a carved wood sign that read, "Love redeems all." Sterling turned to Imani, who stood by the lemonade station laughing with Sister Claudine and a few young mothers. She wore a soft yellow dress, the same color she wore the day Zoe came home from the hospital. It fit her like peace. It was the same color Sterling wore on the day he signed full guardianship rights beside her in court. She was his answer to every question he hadn't known how to ask. Sterling reached into his jacket pocket. The small box inside wasn't flashy. It wasn't from a designer jeweler. It was made by hand. A local craftsman. A gold band with 3 engraved stars. One for him, one for Imani, one for Zoe. The church band transitioned into a slow hymn. That was his cue. Pastor Robinson took the mic and called the crowd's attention. "Family," he said, "today is a day of celebration, restoration, and God's faithfulness. And I believe Brother Sterling has a few words to share." Sterling walked forward. Imani turned, her smile curious. He stood at the same spot where fear once held him hostage. And now, love set him free. Sterling cleared his throat and looked around. "I wasn't raised here," he began, "but this place raised me." Soft laughter bubbled through the crowd. He turned toward Imani. You all know I didn't come from this world. I came from one where appearances mattered more than truth, where legacy meant wealth, not integrity. He looked at Zoe, who was standing next to Sister Claudine holding a bouquet of daisies. But then I met a girl who wrote prayers in the margins of her college textbooks. The crowd murmured. She taught me that home wasn't a mansion. It was 2 bedrooms, church shoes by the door, and a refrigerator filled with leftovers and love. Imani covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Sterling stepped closer. She gave me a daughter I never knew, and a second chance I didn't deserve. He took a deep breath and reached into his pocket. Imani Baker, you have taught me more about faith, forgiveness, and strength than I ever learned in boardrooms. He dropped to one knee. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Zoe jumped up and down, clapping. Sterling opened the box. The ring sparkled faintly in the sunlight. But I can't just ask in one language, he said. He began softly. Will you marry me? Te casarías conmigo? Tu vo me pusa? Maukakamo menika denganku? He paused. In every language I know, my heart only says one thing. Imani, I choose you, forever. 2 weeks earlier, Zoe sat at the dining table, legs swinging beneath her chair as she leaned in with a pink crayon in hand. No, Daddy, it has to be the yellow dress. Mommy says that's her sunshine color. Sterling chuckled, scribbling notes. Got it. Sunshine dress. And don't forget the juice. Mommy likes a lemonade with the raspberries. Raspberry lemonade. Noted. They had been planning in secret ever since Sterling told Zoe, I want to ask Mommy to be our forever. She squealed. Can I help? I'm really good at surprises. Together, they chose the picnic day. Sterling asked Pastor Robinson quietly. Zoe helped decorate the proposal table with sunflowers and picked out the hymn she wanted the band to play. Even the ring had her touch. I want it to be simple, Sterling told the craftsman. But it needs to say 3 things, strength, faith, and joy. Zoe added, and sparkles. Just a little. The craftsman chuckled. I'll do my best. On the morning of the picnic, Zoe helped Sterling pack the proposal box. She kissed the ring box before placing it in his coat pocket. For luck, she said. Thank you, baby, Sterling whispered. When the moment arrived, Zoe stood proudly beside the table, handing the ring to her father when he knelt. Imani gasped. You planned this? She asked her daughter. Zoe nodded. Me and Daddy. But mostly me. Everyone laughed. And as Sterling waited for Imani's answer, Zoe stood with her arms crossed like a proud event planner watching her masterpiece unfold. Time slowed. Imani blinked down at Sterling, hand trembling over her heart. People whispered behind her. Zoe clutched Sister Claudine's hand. Sterling held his breath. Imani stepped forward. Her voice was barely audible at first. You remembered the languages. He smiled. Every single one. She knelt to meet him, eye to eye. You asked me in French, she said. Our first museum date, he replied. You asked me in Spanish. Our night in Miami. And Indonesian. The time we read bedtime stories from my travel journals. She wiped a tear. But there's one language that matters most. He looked at her. Which one? She smiled. The language of sacrifice. She paused. Of consistency. Another pause. Of showing up. And then, yes. In every language that matters, yes. Cheers erupted. Zoe screamed. She said, yes. Sterling placed the ring on her finger, hands shaking. They stood, and the church crowd began clapping and shouting. Someone popped confetti. Sister Claudine shouted hallelujah. Sterling held Imani close, forehead to hers. I'm not perfect, he whispered. I never asked you to be, she replied. He kissed her. Not flashy, not performative, just real. Zoe ran over, wrapping her arms around both of them. And in that field, where pain once took their breath away, love breathed new life into everything. If you cried like I did, comment yes below and hit the like button. Let this story reach more hearts. The morning of the wedding dawned soft and golden over Atlanta. Greater Grace Church, with its whitewashed brick and cobalt blue window panes, was dressed in flowers and silk. Rows of white chairs lined the church lawn under an open-sided tent, surrounded by yellow roses, hydrangeas, and hand-tied ribbons in hues of cream and navy. Inside, the sanctuary echoed with the sound of a gospel choir rehearsing softly. Pastor Robinson stood at the pulpit in quiet reflection, flipping through his sermon notes as ushers coordinated last-minute details. Sterling stood in the groom's suite, buttoning his vest with trembling hands. "Breathe," said Malcolm, his old college roommate and best man. "You've closed million-dollar deals with less panic." Sterling chuckled. None of those deals meant anything close to this. His voice was steady, but his eyes glistened. Across the hall, Imani sat surrounded by her sisters, her mother, and Sister Claudine, who adjusted her veil with practiced grace. The dress was simple, elegant ivory lace that hugged her waist and spilled into soft layers. "You ready, baby?" her mother asked, tears brimming. Imani nodded, smiling through the emotion. "I've never been more sure." Meanwhile, Zoe stood in the hallway in a custom-made ivory dress with a satin blue sash and a basket full of flower petals. "I get to throw these and walk with you?" she asked Sterling earlier. "You're the star of the show," he said. "Always." The choir began their opening song. Guests rose to their feet as the doors opened. Sterling stood tall, breath caught. Imani entered, glowing, no other word for it, and when their eyes met, every heartbreak, every healing, every step of the journey rushed back between them. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a homecoming. The ceremony flowed like water, slow, sacred, and full of warmth. After the opening prayers and music, Pastor Robinson stepped to the center, his Bible open, his gaze soft but firm. "Family," he began, "this ain't just a union, this is a miracle." A soft murmur of agreement moved through the pews. "I've watched Imani Baker grow into a mother, a pillar, and now a bride. I've watched Sterling Whitmore walk through fire, not just in the world, but in his own heart, and come out with something more valuable than wealth. He came out with faith." He turned a page. There's a verse in 1 Corinthians that says, "Love keeps no record of wrongs. It protects, trusts, hopes, perseveres." He looked directly at Sterling and Imani. "Forgiveness ain't always natural," he said. "It's not soft. It's not easy. But it's godly. And this couple, through hurt, through hard times, through silence and storms, chose to forgive, not just once, but daily." He paused. "Faith don't mean you understand everything. It means you move anyway. And family?" He smiled. "It's not built in blood. It's built in sacrifice, in presence, in staying when it's easier to leave." The church hummed with emotion. Sterling blinked back tears. Imani squeezed his hand. Pastor Robinson closed his Bible and faced them fully. "I pronounce this union blessed, not because it's perfect, but because it's proven. You two didn't just fall in love. You fought for it." He stepped back. "You may now take your vows." The reception was in full swing in the church's fellowship hall. Kids danced near the punch bowl. Aunties passed around extra slices of lemon cake. Gospel hits turned into soft soul tunes as evening light poured through stained glass. Sterling stood near the window, watching Zoe play a hand-clapping game with her cousins. He felt a tap on his shoulder. Vivian. His mother wore a pale blue shawl over her arms and held a small wrapped gift. "May I speak with Imani?" she asked. Sterling looked across the room. Imani was chatting with Sister Claudine, her laugh light. "I'll bring her." Moments later, the three stood by the window. Vivian cleared her throat. "I wanted to say, I was wrong." Imani blinked. "I judged what I didn't understand," she continued. "I feared what it would mean, for our name, for our legacy. But I see now, Sterling didn't lose anything. He gained everything." Conrad stepped up beside her, silent at first. "I've never said this before," he said, voice gravelly, "but thank you. For loving our son when we didn't know how to." Imani nodded. "He's not who he was back then." Conrad's eyes glistened. "Neither are we." Vivian held out the small box. "It was my grandmother's. I wore it on my wedding day." "I'd like you to have it." Imani opened it slowly, a delicate diamond pin, vintage and elegant. She looked at them both, then whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." Sterling stepped forward and wrapped his arms around all three. And just like that, the last fracture closed. The final moment arrived under the open sky. As guests stepped outside for the couple's grand send-off, Pastor Robinson asked for everyone to pause. "There's one final walk we must witness," he said. He pointed to the path from the church steps to the garden arch. "And only one person can lead it." Zoe stepped forward, tiny, proud, full of purpose. The same child who once lay limp under this sky now led her parents, hand in hand, down a path of promise. Sterling and Imani followed, each holding one of her hands. The guests clapped slowly at first. Then it built. Standing ovation, tears. Zoe turned to them once they reached the end and whispered, "Now kiss." They laughed, and did. Confetti burst into the sky as the choir began to sing again. There, under the same tree where pain once lived, joy now bloomed. Full circle, full heart, full family. If you cried like I did, comment yes below and hit the like button. Let this story reach more hearts. Spring sunlight spilled across the south side. The front porch of Imani and Sterling's new home buzzed with the hum of everyday life. The modest craftsman-style house, painted soft blue with white trim, stood proudly in a neighborhood just a few blocks from Greater Grace Church. Wind chimes clinked gently from the porch beams. Potted plants lined the steps. A sign near the front door read, "Love lives here." Inside, the morning rush had just ended. Zoe had left for school in braids and glitter shoes, proudly carrying her star reader certificate in her backpack. Sterling made sure to take pictures. Imani made sure to pack her lunch with a little note that said, "You're amazing, keep shining." Now the house was quiet. Sterling sat in the kitchen sipping coffee, flipping through a notebook filled with nonprofit expansion plans. His laptop stayed closed. He wasn't in CEO mode, not yet. Imani walked in wearing leggings and a hoodie, hair wrapped in a scarf, holding a stack of lesson plans. "You good?" she asked. He smiled. "Better than I've ever been." They kissed briefly, familiar, warm, full of understanding. In the living room, Zoe's art from the past year filled the walls, a crayon family portrait, a paper heart with Mommy Plus, Daddy Plus Me written in sparkly glue, and a painting of the tree at Greater Grace where their lives changed forever. The calendar on the fridge marked the upcoming date, Zoe's 1-year cancer-free checkup. No fear surrounded it this time. Only hope. They were no longer healing. They were living. The schoolyard buzzed with laughter and jump ropes snapping the pavement. Zoe was the loudest voice in the mix, calling out instructions for freeze tag, laughing with her best friends, and waving at her teacher from across the lawn. The change was undeniable. She had strength in her step again. Her hair had grown in thick and full. Her smile stretched wider than it had in years. Zoe wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. She'd made honor roll, joined the school's reading club, and was unofficially known as the girl with the sparkly ideas. She'd even started a mini podcast for kids at church called Zoe Talks, where she told stories about being brave when things get scary. Sterling and Imani never missed an episode. At home, she helped cook dinner, painted in the afternoons, and hosted family talent shows in the living room where she sang gospel songs at full volume, wearing sunglasses and a pink feather boa. Her bedroom, once filled with quiet and caution, now burst with color and noise. Stuffed animals lined the windows. A small prayer altar sat near her nightstand with photos of her journey, chemo, cap days, hospital bracelets, the pastor praying over her at discharge. Imani often sat at the doorway and just watched her, not for medical reasons, but because she couldn't believe how far they'd come. "Look what love did," she whispered one evening. Sterling nodded. Love, faith, and one little girl who refused to quit. Zoe peeked out from under her covers and said, "I heard that." They all laughed. Sterling's office had changed. Gone were the glass towers, the ego-driven boardrooms, the endless scramble for control. Now, he ran a new division from a converted co-working space near the church. His startup focused on funding education and healthcare access for underprivileged children, especially those like Zoe. He still wore crisp blazers, but now with sneakers. Still led meetings, but only during the hours Zoe was in school. Still handled major accounts, but paused everything for her parent-teacher conferences and Sunday school recitals. Balance became his new currency. Every evening at 7:30 p.m. sharp, he walked into Zoe's room and said, "Story time?" And every night, without fail, she'd hand him a new book or ask him to make one up. He told her stories of a lion who lost his roar but found his song, of a little girl with warrior curls who turned her hospital bed into a spaceship, of a mom and dad who didn't get it right the first time but learned that second chances were the best kind. One night, after the final page was turned, Zoe looked up at him and asked, "Will you still read to me when I'm a grown-up?" He kissed her forehead. "If you let me, Down the hall, Imani watched them with a quiet smile, her heart full. She wasn't just watching her husband read to their daughter. She was watching him rewrite their legacy, one night, one page, one promise at a time. True wealth isn't what you earn, it's who you love. And when you finally learn to forgive, you give your family the future it deserves. It had been 6 months since the wedding. 6 months since Sterling and Imani said, "I do," under the open sky, with Zoe holding both their hands, her smile shining brighter than any diamond. But as life settled into a new kind of normal, the question shifted from what comes next to what does it all mean? The Whitmore Baker house bustled with weekend rhythm. Zoe was already halfway through her French toast, coloring pages spread across the table, and her podcast mic set up on the kitchen counter. Imani moved through the kitchen in a loose tank top and pajama pants, humming as she brewed coffee. Sterling walked in wearing a navy hoodie and glasses, scrolling through headlines on his tablet. "Your podcast has a guest today, right?" he asked. Zoe nodded. "Yep, Miss Rachel from Sunday school. We're talking about kindness in the lunch line." Sterling high-fived her. "Important journalism." Zoe held up a coloring page. "Look, I made us a family crest." Imani leaned over. It was a big heart with 3 stick figures inside, a tall guy with glasses, a curvy woman with a bun, and a girl with sparkly shoes. Above them, she'd written in big block letters. Imani laughed. "That's about right." Sterling smiled.